Thank you. Legislative priorities for 2019. The City Council approved these priorities, I believe, what was it, December the 2nd or 3rd there? The 3rd. And so we'd just like to go over those, and wherever that discussion takes us, we can go. Our first one, and what you have is the resolution. I actually have the written document that goes behind it, so I might not follow the exact order on the paper there. The PERS contribution rate is something we put on every time, and that is to maintain the 22% contribution rate. We are concerned that any given day, a year, that contribution rate might not be honored, and that's going to be a big cost to the city. Could go up. Approximately 50% of the city is on PERS. So that would be a significant hit. 20%? 50%. 50. It's about 100 employees. Fire, dispatch, and police. The rest of them on union plans.
I will also say, too, in addition to my AML, that I am part of, they always lobby every year to keep it at 22 for all of the, the cities and the municipalities and the small places, because it would devastate some small areas where they have the PERS above 22. So it hasn't been a big concern, but we ask every year, just like Mike said.
The one that has caused us some issues over the year, it's been called revenue sharing, it's been called community assistance, and this year we're calling it the community dividend. The name change basically is coming out of AML, and so we're trying to follow suit. But how many people do we have on the phone? Because this is the best way to show you a revenue sharing trend.
It's essentially non-existent.
It's heading down. And people continue to say, you're getting all that new money from marijuana tax, which is a true statement. 2018 was about $1 million, but our high on revenue sharing was $2.2 million, and this year we're projecting $500,000 going south.
So we're still losing ground even with the marijuana.
The marijuana tax does not break us even. So we keep losing every year. We expect, as we said, we made the assumption that about $500K would come in as community dividend. Tomorrow or Thursday, I think that assumption is going to be modified somewhat with the governor's budget. And
it should be tomorrow.
Should be tomorrow? Okay. And that brings up the other point. We have to make several assumptions when we put the mayor's budget together. And his budget has to be approved by January 15th by the council. If the council fails to do it, then the mayor's original budget is what is approved. The community dividend, we don't really find out about that until summer months. And so if we have estimated poorly, that impacts us. So not only are we asking for a community dividend that is at some type of sustainable level, if it's going to be $500,000, tell us and keep it $500,000. If it's going to be a guess every year, that becomes problematic. And we're also asking to let us know at our fiscal end of year versus the mid-year fiscal review, because as I said, that does play havoc. Now, the first time the mayor's budget came up, we purposely underestimated what we were going to get from community dividend. And that was a conscientious decision by the mayor because we wanted to be pleasantly surprised in June or July and have a little bit more revenue versus shockingly surprised at the same time. We think, based on prior to the governor's budget coming out, that we're about there. If it's cut completely, which is a high probability, we think it might come back in somewhat with the legislative body when they do their budget. So that's three things. We did the name change to be in line. So when you see revenue sharing, community assistance, community dividend, it's all the same thing with just a different name. Provide us some level of certainty every year and let us know before we have to finalize our budget. And that was an ask for that. Then we move to another very problematic area, and that's our FFF contamination. If you take a look back, 3M and others came out with a foam product that was deemed safe. It was required to be used by many of the fire departments. We used it as well as many other agencies, to include the state and the federal government, used it at our fire training center, just like the product said it should be used. And then we got water contamination.
It's spreading.
And this problem for the state of Alaska, you haven't even started scratching it. If you take a look at all the airports, the little airports that probably also has it there, and you start doing water sampling, it's going to be bad. So what we've asked for on the contamination fund is some state leadership and help us pay for what you helped create. Because the University of Alaska was out there using it, the airports used it, federal government has used it. So why are the residents of Fairbanks the only one having to pick this tab up? And to understand how that works, we've spent about $4 million. That goes into the mill rate for the following year until we recovered it. So it is our residents who are having to pay for this contamination. Once again, the product was sold, we used it like we said it, like they were told, and then we found out later. And it seems like everyone has just kind of washed their hands of this, but it is going to get worse. And so we're also asking for a statewide task force to lead this. Instead of every community having to, forge their own way, let's have a statewide task force, and then we'll have this. This is the Alaska plan for addressing, first of all, for discovering it, and then for what kind of cleanup we're going to do.
Is it a state issue or is it a national issue?
Well, it's a national issue, but we're just trying to get to the next level of the state.
It seems to me I read maybe a couple of weeks ago that EPA is not going to list it as a contaminant.
That's ridiculous.
I don't remember reading that. I do remember that there was a supplemental in the governor's budget. I believe it was $9 million to explore this issue around the state, but it was limited to only state facilities. And so we got on with Yuri, our lobbyist, and said, hey, look, see if that can get expanded to also places that they help cause the problem. To date, that hasn't happened yet. So if they're looking at putting $9 million and just doing the discovery, it shows you that that number is going to grow significantly. I hate to hit little airports like Quinnahock at the end of the Connecticut River. They have an airport there. Did they use it? Well, they're sitting right there at the end of the river. So there's a water table and the ocean. The water table is right there. So this is going to be challenging for years to come. There's not very much science on this yet. It's growing, and as we see it, the scientists are changing the contaminate and they're lowering the threshold, which means we might have to go back to areas that we've already checked out and walked away from and reopen, and that will be even more significant cost.
And we have hooked up a lot of homes, to city water as a result. And I just want to add too that we had Paul Ewers contact what Mike said, these organizations that used it at the university, and all of them couldn't find any records of them using it. They all said, we can't give you, we kind of know who did and when they did, but nobody remembers or even has information on when they used it. So we kind of felt abandoned by the people that we actually looked at.
Who in the city kind of manages it?
But we had taken over the fire training center. We can show you records that on any given date, someone used the fire training center. But what we don't do is say, hey, they used it with water, they used it with foam. This foam is pretty expensive. One could argue that, yeah, you might have seen me out there using foam, but it wasn't that foam because it's too expensive. There's no way to prove that.
Yeah.
And so, but what we have done, this is our second year that we have raised this flag. We didn't get much response last year, so we set off on our own and our attorney went looking. We have hired an attorney on contingency. It's a nationwide law firm, and they've been doing this. So they now have this case, and I guess I can say it's 3M we're looking at.
Class action.
So it's a joint on some type of class action lawsuit. If we're successful in getting that back, that means that those funds would be returned to the taxpayer, not in a check form, but your mill rate would be lowered for the years that it would take to give that back to you. And we think that's important because, once again, why are the residents of Fairbanks having to pay for this contamination when you've had everyone from the federal government, the state, and local municipalities contribute to it? But that's where we are on that. So there's a frustration level with the public because the standard has changed. We, like I said, spent $4 million where you had a well that was above the contamination, at or above the contamination threshold. We worked with Golden Heart Utilities, put the main in, and hooked them up. If you didn't have a well, or if you had a well that that didn't do drinking water, we didn't hook you up. So there were some who were upset with this. If you had vacant land, there was nothing to hook up to, so we didn't hook you up. So now if you want to put a house on that, we've had some people come back on us on that. But right now, that would not be eligible to be hooked up by ourselves.
And some folks want free water for life. They've demanded that for life, and it's, you know, it's been a challenge. Sorry.
That's no. The other area that we're asking for help, it used to be called CSP. It's now called ESP, which is Emergency Service Patrol. This patrol is it's a van that goes around, and when you see some people who might be inebriated, check to see if they need assistance, and they pick them up. I want to give you some numbers. For 2016, 5,485 calls for service, and 729, that's with the van, and 729 for foot patrols. In 2017, it was 5,900. Of that, almost 3,000 of them required transport.
Why such a difference?
I didn't give you so the last time I gave you was 5,004, and the foot patrols was 729. In 2016, we took over, so I don't have good data for the transports, so I didn't give you that transport number. 2017 was the first year we had a complete year. So out of approximately 6,000 calls, 3,000 of them were transport. But our foot patrols dropped to 352. And the way the contract reads right now, if nothing else is going on, then they can do a foot patrol. Well, the foot patrols have dropped significantly, and we need to get some more visibility out there with the foot patrols.
Who's they? Is it the police department?
No, it's our contract. That's our CSP contractor.
Oh, okay.
CSP folks.
So what we have done for 2019 is that I put a mod together, ran it by a few people, and now the contractor has that mod. That from 1 April to end of September, we're asking to provide an additional person to be in uniform, to be a foot patrol in the downtown section, and there's a map that shows what area we're looking at, to do a more visual presence. And they will run 8 hours a day, so it wouldn't be a 24-hour operation like it is right now. They would run 8 hours a day, and we're flexible on when that 8 hours would be, depending on what's going on downtown. So it'll probably start around 11 a.m. and finish 8 hours later. It could kick it a little bit further in the back. We don't have a cost for that yet. When that cost comes in, we will present it to the council and see if they want to go that way.
I'm sorry, I don't know what the foot patrol does.
So if you're out walking about and you find someone in trouble, instead of waiting for a business owner or a resident to call you, you've seen it, you make the call. The van comes and picks them up.
Okay.
So it's another set of eyes out there. Right now, the calls are coming in mostly from businesses or residents are walking down the street, say, hey, someone's passed out beside the road, okay? And so what we're doing is we put the foot patrol in the biggest area where people are gathering the most, and hopefully they would see that starting to happen early, talk to the individual, see if they need help, call for it before it escalates to, hey, there's someone laying on the ground right here. We don't know. Because that someone laying on the ground, the dispatcher doesn't know what it is.
Sure.
So now you're going to dispatch an ambulance because it could be a heart attack. It could be a stroke. And so then you'll watch your numbers go up with that emergency equipment moving.
Mm-hmm.
So anything to keep that emergency equipment from rolling out,
Sure.
it's a savings. And so a van driving by with a guy on the ground who has, firsthand visuals says, yeah, we got a guy down and he smells of alcohol. That's a different call level versus man down, not breathing. We've noticed across the nation, just reading on this, that 911 calls are up. The Good Samaritan these days is not the individual who stops and gets out of their vehicle and go checks on someone. The Good Samaritan does the drive-by. Hey, there's something going on right here. And so you're flooded with 911 calls, but no one, okay, I won't use it. Fewer people actually stop and say, hey, I just stopped. This guy's been in an accident. He looks like he's all, you see the difference?
Mm-hmm.
The dispatcher has more information when someone actually takes the time to stop and says, hey, this is what we're faced with. And they can get the dispatch right first. Instead of, the term is go ugly early, send everybody, and then once you figure out it's out, you start sending them back. And if you're truly in trouble, you do want someone to go ugly early. You want as many resources coming your way as possible. So that's the challenge we have.
Just a quick question, Mike.
Sure.
So it sounds like, if I have this right, the Downtown Association used to run the community service patrol.
Correct.
The city has picked it up.
Correct.
Would you be able to compare numbers from when Downtown Association was running it, just to see if there's?
We have numbers. It's just the way they counted, the way we're counting, a little bit different.
Okay.
Because let's say the call comes in, we might dispatch the ambulance and then turn it around and then dispatch the. So, in theory, that's 2 calls because you roll the ambulance and then pull them back from the van. And just over 2018, you're looking at almost 6,000 again. The number of transports have gone up by 700. Now, one of the reasons I would think for that is the sobering center, because that was the first full year, 2018, or at least most of that year they were open.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing the transports going to the sobering center now, which helps the hospital, because if you keep rolling all these people into the, the ER, you're flooding the ER. And so the sobering center has its financial challenges also. And the city and the Downtown Association are basically funding this ESP.
So can you back up and?
Sure.
Because I understand this program, I've been involved in it over the years, but it sounds like now the partners are narrower. Can you talk about who are partners and how much, what your budget is? I'm not sure why this is capital versus operating, so I need you to tell me the total amount of money.
$250,000, right?
Who are the financial partners now? And what are the pieces, like people versus vans versus defrayed ER or whatever the costs are?
Okay, you gave me quite. There is one van, and with a person that's in that van taken, and I think they have another person on at the call center. The dispatch, our dispatch handles it. It's a 24-hour, 7 days a week operation. No, it's not. It is it's not quite a 24-hour operation. The early morning hours, we're not doing it
Short
anymore.
of that, like 4-hour difference. So 20 maybe.
Downtown Association gives approximately 100,000, of which there is a page, and there's no way I can print it off, a page of people who contribute to that $100,000 from the Downtown Association. It's businesses and everything else. I've seen the list, and it's quite an impressive.
Is one of them. There's
Yeah.
several that give, and I've been approaching.
100,000 downtown.
Correct.
What about TCC and Doyon?
If they give through the Downtown Association. It doesn't come straight to us. TCC's point of view, and I don't want to speak for them, is that they're running that sobering center right now. And so they're focusing on how to come up with the $1.5 million a year to run that sobering center.
They're running low on funds, and the grant's going to run out, but that's a whole different ballgame.
But I do believe Doyon is funding through the Downtown Association. And then when the state was healthy, we would get $200,000 to $300,000 from them to make this also run. We haven't received anything from the state in the last 2 years. We're asking for what are we asking for? We're asking for $300,000 from the state. don't think we're gonna get that. That means somehow, once again, the city residents are gonna have to pick that up. Also,
300,000, is that the emergency service
patrol,
patrol? That's what that's
correct.
associated with.
And Rick, I'll add too, this van takes a lot of pressure off the police and fire. That was the whole reason for it. And Chief Jukes loves it because we've had a shortage of police, and we all know that. We're going to have 4 retirements this year, and we know that's going to be a challenge. So this van really helps the city. I've approached a few people to help kick in some money too from the downtown core, because a lot of this pickup is kind of the downtown core, and that's another issue that I'm pretty passionate about is, you know, Golden Heart Plaza and public inebriation, and what do we do with that? It's not against the law to do that right now, unless they assault somebody. What do we do? And that seems to be a real issue downtown. That's a whole different conversation. But this CSP, ESP is often our biggest thing that we ask Juneau for. We don't go in there guns blazing demanding a bunch of money other than this contamination. Now is a whole different thing. But it's such an important part of our city. It's crucial. You bet.
I think that, sir.
Well, is there any thought of, I'm looking at the numbers and I suspect a lot of them are repeat people. Is there any tracking on that?
Yeah,
probably.
Super
yes.
users.
Frequent flyers.
Yeah.
The Sobering Center, Shirley had some numbers put together, and she shows their high-end users.
Yeah.
And there were several that I couldn't believe it.
Probably
And
right
period
every
of
day.
quarter, there were 20 to 30 times hitting the Sobering Center.
And it's temporary there. You go and you know, it's not a lockdown. And
yeah, so
Get lit, having them.
we've got a chronic problem.
I mean, I think as a community, what we try to find is a humane, compassionate, and efficient, safe mechanism, you know, and because we have to respond, because at some point it'll be the officer on the street, in the ER, at the hospital. Those are the high.
it's been a long time since we had an exposure death in this city. And I think part of that is the van and the people watching out for them. I do. I mean, we haven't had one that I can think of in a while. If the van picks you up if you're there, and if somebody notices, I mean, that's the part someone has to make the call. That's the van just happens to come upon you.
You're right. If you said, hey, we don't need this program, all it does is shift everything to the fire and the police and the ER. And that's much more expensive. And the opportunity loss cost there, if you're showing up for somebody who's inebriated and you have an ambulance with at least 2 people in that ambulance at the paramedic level, and you're in a queue now and there's someone at the house who's also unconscious, unknown, that's the opportunity loss right there. Now, the mayor has talked to the chief of police to see if we can have a foot patrol police as well as a CSP or ESP downtown this year. Police are going to try. It's very challenging. It looks like we're going to lose 3 more police officers very shortly in the next 3 months for retirement. And we hired 2. We'll
2
lose
last week.
3. The trend is still down.
And that's nationwide, police officers nationwide. It's not just a Fairbanks problem, but it's hitting us pretty good because we're 30,000 in the city, but we're never 30,000 in the city. We're 40 or 50,000 in the city most of the time with everyone that comes in. And we're like that all the time, every day. And on days like when AFN comes to town or we have these big celebrations, it's even bigger than that. So it puts a strain on the police.
Wait, I thought, where is it? It's going to come back.
I interrupted you.
No, it's gone. I lost it. Anything else on the ESP? The next 3, we, the city, wanted to make sure we start getting some exposure and add our voice to, if you want to call it the clean air or the energy. And the first one is the LNG storage credits, and we have Gene here who can jump in and also help out. What we're trying to do is call attention how important those storage credits are for the final price to the meter. If we don't get those storage credits, it's only going to cost more money to get gas to people's homes, and that is not going in the right direction. Now, we do know that IGU has hired a lobbyist to also work on extending that storage credit. Right now, it has, correct me, Gene, it has to be in use before the end of December 31st, 2019. The definition of in use is that he has to have some gas in that tank. So right now, it looks like it might be a photo finish. It's going to be, that tank is supposed to be done in December 19. So he's got to meet that date. He's trying to buy himself, he being Dan Britton, trying to buy himself some additional time by getting an extension. We would support that also. As a matter of fact, the mayor's heading down to Juneau next week. We would support that extension and then get gas in that tank, and then we got to get the storage credits. So there's some hurdles there. We think that's very important. I used to have the numbers off the top of my head. If we don't get that storage tank, what it would jump the price of the gas to the meter, and I just don't recall it at the top of the head, but there might be a couple other people here who might pull that number out. So that's where we wanted to add our voice as a city, so our state representatives will keep looking. And then right along with that is conversion assistance. We need some creativity here, and it's probably going to have to come from the federal level. And instead of the city being the one, you know, asking, we would like to have some of our state representatives to help us. And let's have one voice, why it's important to have some type of conversion assistance to convert these boilers and get people on natural gas. There. Okay. So that's what we're asking for. We didn't ask for any specific money. We just said, hey, you're going to need the conversion assistance. And once again, it's another talking point. If we can get people talking about this, we can get some movement. I don't think outside of the people who've been working on it, we're getting much traction and much conversation going on at the legislature. But Gene, you're there a lot more than we are. And so we're just pushing them and saying, hey, you need to keep thinking. This needs to be in the back of your head. And speaking in the back of your head is the one that scares the city significantly. And that right now, it looks like the stick that EPA can use is going after the point sources. So let's just focus on the 1 point sources in the city of Fairbanks, the Aurora power plant. So if EPA comes at this from a clean air point of view and saying they're going to go after the point sources, which is a high probability right now because legally they can, let's assume it will take at least $1 million, if not several millions of dollars to retrofit the Aurora plant. That Aurora plant then is going to turn around and put that cost to the taxpayers or to the ratepayers.
Rate base.
They have about 283 customers in the city of Fairbanks. One of them City Hall. One of the customers the police department. Another customer is the fire department. So the city is kind of concerned about how we come out doing that. And all this was a talking point. So if you play this out, we have enough time. It's just like a meteor coming to the Earth. If you can just change the trajectory when it's way out, it's easy. If you wait until the sun shadow is, or the sun is blocked out, it's a lot harder. So 2019, we will fail to meet the clean air standard. That I think everyone will nod their head that we're not going to make it. That means 2020, EPA will probably have something in store for us and come out with some type of requirement. Give it 2021 for these fixed sources to come back and say, here's our plan that has to be approved by EPA. Let's say the plan is approved in 20, where are we at, 19, 20, 21. 2022, they start doing the construction. They finish 2022, 2023. Then they go to the RCA and ask for a price increase. So based on our projections, you got 5 years to make, or actually you have 4 years to make a difference before the price starts hitting you. In 5 years, the way things look like right now, the probability is you're going to start paying high rates based on the fixed fixed sources. And that is scary for us in the city. And we're hoping that we can do something much earlier instead of waiting until it's right on top of us. So that's kind of where we are.
I just did the quick math, Mike. Again, for the, per $1 million for those, how many did you say, 200?
About 280.
283? That's $3,534 per million.
But that's only steam consumers.
Well, they sell electricity in Golden Valley too.
Well, I understand that, but you can't just spread the cost of that capital cost to the steam consumers. You gotta spread it to the electric consumers also.
Except, no, it's, so they would break out the cost, what it costs to do the hot water system, the steam, and what it costs for electricity, and they would break it out. So the electrical cost we could spread out quite a bit more. It's that steam cost is what scares us.
It's much more limited base.
So I
Yeah.
guess you can't do the math what you almost did.
Not that quick.
But no, but it would give you a, that would be, you see where this is heading.
Yeah.
In any regard, it's going to be much more than $1 million to do any kind of retrofits over
Oh, yeah.
that power.
$1 million in a power plant.
So I think, I would encourage the city to, when you go to Juneau, to, visit with the administration and maybe the Commissioner of Environmental Conservation about the plan that they're putting together, because the state's gonna put together a plan now, not the borough, but the state, and they're gonna submit it, whatever, sometime this year. It'll come out for draft and for comment. I'm sensing that they see us having made progress on attainment. And they've got numbers both in North Pole and in Fairbanks that would demonstrate that. And they would agree with you that this whole thing on the point source is an absolute irrational thing. I don't expect that their plan is going to necessarily have some kind of a point source requirement in it. What the EPA might do about that, I think, is the next thing to address. But we should begin to align around a rational approach in this plan, I think, and then go to the EPA and say, look here, we're making progress. You can't force, there are things in that law that says that the EPA has to consider the hardship on us. I mean, so it isn't just a one-way street. So I think I want to move kind of past just the wringing of hands into this next stage of, okay, let's get this plan formulated. Let's kind of move towards the final stages. I think one piece that I see is this electrostatic precipitators, the ESPs. Those are a way that you can drop out the particulates from the smokestacks, the wood stove chimneys. Borough has whatever, it was $400,000 they put in there, and or trying to certify the ESP. There's a debate over whether the EPA will allow for ESPs in the plan right now because they're not certified. Well, I think going back to this plan we got to get, I think the ESPs, we need a target pilot project in North Pole with the ESPs, and we need to help the borough get comfortable with that approach. I know the DEC wants it. So if we're trying to get a community plan, it seems to me there's some things that we can latch on to and start pushing the state to this direction. And then focus all of our energies on convincing the EPA that they need to approve this plan. That gives us some breathing room. The point source thing is just completely irrational, and I don't know anyone that doesn't agree with us on it. So I think we can get, but we have to be together, and the ESPs is a big part of it, I think.
I hear you. I agree with the irrational. I guess my point of view, I'm somewhat jaundiced because I spent 18 years as Director of Public Works for Fort Wainwright, receiving the largest clean air fine of $24 million because we did not have a bag house on our power plant in 1997. Bag house on the power plant literally required an act of Congress. It's called a Milcon project. It required an act of Congress, okay? Congress didn't do it. Nobody at Fort Wainwright or even the Department of Defense can build or put that bag house on without an act of Congress. I watched 4 years of irrational thought coming at us on Fort Wainwright. So, very concerned that that same thought level might continue.
And appreciate that, Mike, and I'm not, in fact,
Yeah.
I would tell some folks, which I've said, we should, riot in the streets if this stuff moves forward. Well, the one thing about business, what they will do is they'll be rational. They will abide or they'll shut down. So
Right.
Aurora Energy will either do these retrofits or they'll shut down. The rest of us will be rabble-rousing in these hearings but business doesn't act that way. So, not turning this into a debate on it, I'm just hoping that we can begin to take what I think is in alignment with the state, and what I've heard is the sensitivity by the EPA to this, and make sure that plan doesn't include the point source fact, but it does have some of these other things that I think it needs to get to ESP.
One of the things that I'm hearing that I'm missing in what you're saying, Rick, that Mike did say is a coordinated effort. And of course, we've been talking about a coordinated effort. I know the borough was, involved and coordinated it for a while and is certainly, probably because of the legislation has backed off somewhat. The city is interested in a coordinated effort. Air quality task force is kind of, not necessarily disbanded, but, kind of inactive. DEC is involved, but, kind of involved at a state level, and as usual, the community doesn't hear much about what goes on, why they work the problems. It seems to me that the community, again, ought to be in charge of their own destiny, and if the DEC is going to be the point on this issue, then they ought to be interacting with somebody like the Air Quality Task Force, or at least a committee of the whole, including the city, the borough. We just can't sit back and kind of watch this stuff come down the road and be surprised. We have to be participating in the decisions as they move forward.
There's also a concern that it's an education level for the public at large. I've been in many a meeting where the point sources, we're going to have to hit the point sources, and I've heard residents go, "Good, hit them." They don't understand the second, third, and fourth. And so we just explained the consequences of just hit them on the Aurora. Let's play the game at Wainwright. So let's hit Wainwright with $5 or $6 million and have them put on that. Well, yes, that's a big budget, except it's run by a contractor, and so they will do it. That cost will go up to Fort Wainwright. There is a privatization housing contractor that has to pay. Well, it's supplemented. It's supplemented by the Army, but they have to pay the utility rate. Well, they're going to have to start paying more money. They have a set amount of money that comes in based on the BAH, which means they're going to have less money to do any type of repairs to the houses at Fort Wainwright. So the second and third order impacts where let's just stick the point sources, even the military one, is that you're going to run that housing into the ground. And we're going to be back where we were 15 years ago when the Milcon program couldn't keep up with all the repairs. So it's this, I just sit there and cringe when I hear people go, yeah, stick the point sources. They don't realize that they're sticking themselves. It's just going to take a little bit longer. So it's an education thing, but I do hear you.
Well, we should have Jim, your comment on a coordinated approach, and I know you've offered the FEDC to try to continue on what was the work that the borough started with the stakeholder group, and there's been some effort. How we do that, I think, is important, because too broad of the public and you get all these people that don't really understand, too narrow and you don't get enough buy-in.
I think, Rick, in difference to you, the only one I've really offered that to is you, and I need to offer that to a bigger audience. I can't put all the responsibility on your shoulders, and I'm sorry for doing that. And we talked, Joe and I yesterday talked to Prox about the electronic precipitators, and, you know, as you probably know, he has a semi-plan to move forward with it, but, you know, as we kind of look at the issue and say, okay, how can we, you know, help this? FEDC obviously has limited resources, but, you know, from our perspective, it is the number, well, forgetting the
It's
governor.
very high on the list.
Forgetting the governor right now. It's the number one economic challenge this community has today.
Someone say governor?
Not the governor, the pending budget.
Somebody say the word governor?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking tomorrow about tomorrow anyway.
That guy's I can't figure him out.
Oh, yeah, we need to solve
I've tried.
it, and we want to help.
So our next point here is who would have thought that a firing range at the end of a international airport would not go over well? Who'd have thunk that?
It'd be a skate race.
So the airport has made it known that that range is closing down, okay?
Yeah.
Which, that's where our law enforcement and across the board train. And so
That
it's
came
certain,
from the FAA, by the way.
well, yeah, I mean,
So we have a new one on our sites.
yeah, you couldn't have a drone base either at the end of the year. I mean, there's some things that are pretty obvious. So the state with the troopers, North Pole, Fairbanks Airport, all gotten together and realized the need for a new range. Right now, they're looking for some money to put a study together to have a new law enforcement range somewhere in the North Pole area. So what this is once again, it's more information, and North Pole, I believe, is leading the charge to get the money. We're going to support that because it would be a range that would help everybody out. And so that's on there, and oh, and the FBI will need it too. And there's, you know, so it's another one of these joint ventures that we're hoping to get some synergy on.
Like, kind of also being studied right now is a multi-use facility for Miles and Wainwright community.
That's for
And
physical fitness,
That study is in the hands of Fort Wainwright.
but that's physical fitness, not a range.
Well, I get it, but it's still a multi-use facility. My question is there any way that those two things could be incorporated?
When you try to do something for jack of all trades, it usually comes out to be, so I don't see how those two would even be compatible together. You would want the exercise facility in as closest to the highest population as possible, and you'd want the range away from the highest population as possible. The coordination that's going to require, I don't see that to get much traction, but I hear you.
So were you thinking about physical location?
It's right now, everyone kind of shakes their heads, says, yeah, it should be in the North Pole area. They're looking for a study, some funding to put that out, and then say, hey, where is the best location, and then go through that whole NEPA process, because this is going to be an EIS. You're going to be putting lead somewhere down range, and you're going to have noise. You're going to have to contend with everything from habitat.
And this is indoor, outdoor.
It would have been outdoor.
Fully outdoor?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got a rural facility. Has there been discussion of improvement and expansion of some kind of partnership with the borough out in South Fairbanks?
I know the borough was involved in that meeting. It is an area that we can explore. I believe what we have now is that the range there does not allow you to do move and shoot type functions. That's what I was wondering. Okay, it's all static, and I use it. And the law enforcement now are moving more and more to a move and shoot type thing, to include entry into a house, which doesn't exist there. So yes, if you're just going to go and put rounds into a paper target, that can be used, but the more advanced move and shoot, obstacles, duck behind, partner over here, it's much, you need something different than what we have currently.
True training facility.
Yeah. And then every time we have a council meeting, We're reminded of our 1940s heating system as it moans and clicks.
Sounded like a ghost last night. It was eerie.
It was moaning last night, like, oh, someone's in the basement hurt. We think there's a little chance this is going to be it, but we went 2 or 3 years without asking for anything because we were asked to go easy. So now we're just going to say, hey, we need some help on the heating system. We've been putting money aside to do this. My concern on this heating system is that once you start trying to replace this heating system, no matter how much time and money you've slotted for it, you're going to need more time and you're going to need more money. You're going to hit asbestos, you're going to hit lead-based paint, you're going to hit it all in that building, and you have a very short window in which to do it because you'll need that steam heat back on. So this is, we're looking at a $4 million, right now without doing any studies at all, we're looking at about a $4 million price tag to start doing something. It's well past its life expectancy. So we'll see how that goes. We had 2 councilwomen support the voting this year, and they were appalled at our statewide voting system equipment. And so this was put on the last minute, and they have firsthand experience of this, so I'm not going to be nearly as good as articulating. But they were embarrassed about the equipment that was there, and they think that statewide we need to start putting some money into getting some new voting machines out there. And so we put that on there to once again, to be a talking point. We're not asking for money to, upgrade what we want system-wide. We think it's time that the state of Alaska invest in voting machines.
When I voted myself, the one that pulls it in, it took 10, 15 tries to get it to pull in. And but when I was there, the guy in front of me just couldn't get it to work. They only had one there. I understand from somebody, and I want to say maybe Jim Sackett said this, but don't quote me on that, with the governor's office, that they had some around that they planned on doing it in 19. And if that's the case, great. But I know they're very stubborn, these old ones. So either they AccuVote or I can't remember. It's the great big box with the kind of the tan top, and it's a big card you slide in there. June and Valerie are the 2 councilmen. There's only one there at their spot on the fairgrounds. And you get bottlenecked 10, 15 tries, that's a lot. So, and voting's really in the eyes of the national scene right now. Are they getting counted? Are they getting counted accurately? Does it, I don't like to mess with that part of, our obligations. Voting is the bedrock for a lot of people, and they got to get it right. My thought anyway, but I understand that they're going to do something, but I haven't heard directly from anybody else, Mike, so I'm still going to ask.
And they weren't accusatory.
No.
I was there in the meeting. They weren't accusatory about, or at least when they were communicating it to the delegation. It was just more, maybe it's maintenance. I mean, perhaps some are all
it was
need to be replaced, but it could be just maintenance. Maybe they just need to do a better job of maintaining these things, do better. Yeah, just like you do with your copier. In the off season, a better regimen for maintenance. But in any regard, they wanted to put it on the radar screen of the state.
That kind of closes our legislative priorities for 2019. I'd like to also say that the mayor and the other 2 mayors have a pretty good working relationship. We're not seeing any rub points, and so anytime there's even close to disagreement, they get together and they've been able to work it out. So I think it's good to see the 3 elements all working together. So I'm just bragging on you a little bit, boss. Good job of keeping everybody happy with each other. But any other questions?
Right. Yeah, just dollars. The PERS, both the backlog, our share, the city share.
22.
What's that number?
22%.
Yeah, that's the percentage. You want to know.
Dollars. Yeah,
And
sorry.
then would you walk through the city tax cap and your ability I just want to know how that works,
That's
and
an
your
interesting
ability to
one.
move that needle
Well,
or not.
there's been talk about moving the needle, yes.
But can you walk through that a little bit, because, you know, you're gonna see, I think in about, 25 hours, you're gonna see the elimination of PERS, of that local, that 300 million probably in the local share, you know, that's the backlog of the liability. I suspect that'll be on the CHOP list. I suspect municipal assistance on the CHOP list. Borough's probably gonna see the elimination of bond debt reimbursement. I think the municipalities are gonna get a really big chunk of this reduction. Well, $1.6 billion is a big reduction, so I guess I'm just wanting to try to start to think about what the city's ability to respond is within your tax caps. Not that you wanna go to them or whatever, but what,
You want me to
Go ahead.
go through some of this here?
Yeah, here,
So
I know.
I guess that the cap within a cap might come up. So, right now, 4.9% is the cap. And then what other taxes the voters agree to, and they've done that several times. And then new construction falls outside that, so we can, based on that. Then we made this up for the council, because too often we've heard people saying, just do this, just do that. So let me just run down this. The idea, let's just use more of the permanent fund. Right now we use 4.5%, and that's by charter. To do that, you have to have 4 council members put it on up for the voters.
That's the city's permanent fund money that
Yes,
we have.
which is 125 million right now. And 70% of the registered voters have to approve using more. When was the last time we had 23% show up? That's in the impossible category. Wasting time
But it
on
is brought
doing
up.
that
It is brought up a
is
lot.
a waste of time.
Just take more
70% of the registered voters.
Of
registered
the
voters.
registered voters, you can't get them to even show up.
Good luck.
Elimination of the tax cap takes 6 council members to put it on, and a majority of the voter approval to eliminate the tax cap. That's almost an impossibility also. So then you say, let's go after alcohol. If you go after alcohol, which is currently 5%, the cap would apply. Meaning you increase the alcohol, you're gonna have to bring down the property tax, and so.
because it's capped.
It's
Doesn't matter
capped.
what's within
That's right. So you're wasting your time. You're just changing who pays. Okay? It's a wash. Increase marijuana tax from 5 to 6. We can do that. It is outside the cap, but we only can go up about 1% more because, and that's if the borough approves. We kind of have to walk hand in hand. So that's a possibility, but I'm thinking you're probably in the 50 percentile, and what you get isn't going to help you. So you'd spend a lot of effort, political clout, and get beat up a lot, and you won't really get that much money. Increase the bed tax, which we've tried twice now and gotten beat up. It is outside the cap. Okay, the bed tax is outside the cap. You can change the distribution of the bed tax. You know, right now, how that money, without changing any bed tax at all, you can change how it's distributed, and that would bring a lot of people out, because that bed tax not only goes to the city, quite a bit of it goes to Fairbanks, who's doing an excellent job of bringing tourism here, and you don't want to stifle that. But then there's also a part that the city gets, and they put it out in the form of grants, and every year we have numerous people, numerous organizations sharing that. In fact,
more that come out the
Yukon Quest, Ice Alaska, the arts, you can just name it, and every one of those would benefit. So if you took that money away from them, where are you going on that? And the tobacco tax is the same thing. The cap would apply. It's currently at 8%. We're seeing tobacco drop. We're seeing marijuana go up. So that's where we are with that. When you take a look, if you take a look at our budget book, the mayor's letter was incorporated into that budget book. And what we showed since 2008, and I hate to do it this way, the orange lines represent the Anchorage cost of living adjustments for every year. The blue line shows what the expenditures are and the revenues. Notice, the revenues since 2008 have not kept up with the cost of inflation, okay? The expenditures have been less than the cost of inflation. And we're seeing this in several areas. Maintenance, it's not much longer before we're going to be in the same situation that the borough is. Right now, we've been putting away money into our capital program to take care of the maintenance requirements, to make sure we have enough equipment on hand. The first hit we really took was this year on snow blowers. We were down to one snow blower. We have money set aside to buy some later on this year, but we thought we'd be able at least another year to try to keep them going. We were wrong, and so you're starting to see that happen. The finance department sat down and did a projection of revenues and projection of expenditures, and I believe we have 2 more years going the same way we are before we start eating into the savings account. And I see no way out of it right now, because every time we bring this up, there is a huge pushback. If you want to maintain the level of service you have right now, you have to at least meet the inflation, and we're not. But we don't want to maintain. At least the residents don't. What we hear is not maintaining the level of service. They want to increase. And so you can't expect to have declining revenues as inflated revenues, increase the services and think that's going to work out. We asked 2 years ago, we went and did this presentation around and said, tell us what services you want us to cut. Not one person came forth and said cut. And if they would have, and it had been done in public, that person would have probably been hammered. Don't cut that program, cut this program. And so it's just not, it's kind of frustrating. So if you are you happy with the current level of services, something's going to have to be done with revenue. And the cap within the cap is hurting us. Now, Jerry Clearworth said that he is going to start working on language and try to make a pitch to get rid of the cap within the cap. It's not the cap that's hurting as much, it's the cap inside the cap that's doing it. And as I talked to him, I said, you've got a hard sell. But he was the one that kind of put that forward. So it'd be the natural one to do it. He's going to start, he told us that he's going to start working on that language.
The cap within the cap.
So you got the 4.9% property tax. So you do something on alcohol, okay? You raise that alcohol.
That's what you mean.
That's the cap within the cap. And so if you could raise the alcohol and not have this go down.
Understand. So what's the fund balance now? Not the permanent fund, but the fund balance.
It was 11 million before we started moving capital around. We did. I really appreciate what the council did. We put some money in capital this year, and we desperately need it. So at the beginning of the year, at the end of 2019, it was around 11 million. So fund balance ending, she's showing right now 18 million. So how did that happen? I think that's a little high. And I believe we have to have by code, what was it, almost 9 to 10 million? So you'll see that fund balance fall down. Rick, I'm kind of just shooting off the hip here, and I see you taking notes down. I don't want you to use that.
I am. I'm writing down numbers.
I know, that's why I'm looking, I go, you know.
What Mike meant to say was,
This is general area we're talking about.
Hey, Mike, can you just note what you're referring to, and if you're using?
Oh, the fund balance is not in there at all. That's just.
No, I mean the book you're looking at right
so
now.
So I'm in the newly published 2019 City of Fairbanks budget book.
So the newly published 2019
budget book.
Yes.
City of Fairbanks budget book.
Annual budget.
Annual budget.
Yeah,
Mayor's
and I
budget.
think it's online now.
Yeah, I think I've seen it.
Yeah.
Looks a little different than what I submitted.
And on his letters up front that shows the charts.
Would it be under documents and reports?
Yes.
That is, by the way, our brand new website that just kicked out a few months back, and it's been very well utilized and took a lot of work, but man, it is really pretty.
Who did it?
Well, Teal and some other employees headed it up, and the company does the one in Valdez and a couple other communities, a couple in Canada. But our main one was Teal. Stephanie, who else?
Yeah, we got
You were on that committee.
Well, I found out that if you want to do a website right, instead of directing people to do it, find the ones who are really interested in doing it, because they put their heart and soul into it. And our old website was just too much.
It was archaic. I wish the borough would work on theirs a little bit too. Theirs gets confusing.
We had several different website developers present. We looked at this website. We liked how this thing works. That's it.
Hey, Jomo, don't you love technology?
Page 11 are the graphs I just talked about.
Right? Yeah.
You got to have a techie nowadays. You have to.
He's actually the techie.
Page 11.
This is funny.
Page 11 is the graphs. There's your mayor's letter right there. Keep going, one more. There, that's the graphs I was talking about earlier.
Right there.
So here we are looking at a $1.6 billion cut in the state budget. That's going to impact all communities. Gene, what, so municipalities are going to get, hit hard, and schools are going to get hard at community and revenue sharing. What's going to happen in non-organized areas?
Well, I think that's been one of the things that has kept the House from organizing. The group of rural Democrats had indicated that they wanted to see what happened with the budget numbers to figure out the way they needed to go to in order to protect what's important to them. So they're unclear, they're unsure. The number is so big that you can't expect it to be made up out of somebody else's piece of the pie. And so there's just a lot of trepidation about exactly how that gets applied. I suspect that the governor, just coming off of his election, is figuring that, okay, he's going to make good on his election pledge and propose cuts as, the executive branch of government. If the legislative branch of government disagrees, they'll make adjustments, and he'll be able to say, I asked, they wouldn't go along with me, but I kept my pledge. So we're just going to have to see how that plays out.
But I think what Jim's referring to is the fact that we're talking right now about the fact that the city can do some things because we're organized, and the city can tax its residents to provide for, backstop what's being lost by the state, the borough also. What happens in those places where that's not the case?
There's no mechanism. Even where you have like a Northwest Suffolk Borough where they've got a PILT payment that comes from the Red Dog, that's been negotiated and is put in place. Over time, if things got really drastic there, would they propose an adjustment? Maybe they would. It would take some time, and they've got to keep an eye on the commodity price and what they do to their commodity price.
So the PILT payment you're talking about, Gene?
Yeah.
To negotiate that differently and.
Yeah. The mine operation there,
Red Dog.
So that's an example in an area that has and potential means of generating local support revenue. Many areas, vast areas of the state, they don't have that.
Yeah.
And that's what we heard on the community dividend. If you take a look, jump to the future, the community dividend might be going to the rural areas, and some of those areas, that's the only source of income. And places like Fairbanks won't get anything. And if you take a look at it from a statewide position, it makes sense because we have an ability to get funding elsewhere, whereas a smaller community might not.
I was pretty much told that in my first year when I went down to Juneau. I was told by some folks down there, just you might start decreasing. And I think my very first budget of the council, I put up 0. Didn't I? Or pretty darn 100,000, really low on purpose. And the council, of course, corrected me and put a higher number. But I'd almost want to be 0 just because I was told that eventually Matsu and Bridge Fairbanks would not get it and go to the rural areas where they have a really tough time. And I kind of understood that. I don't know when that's going to happen. Right now, we're still getting funds, but I imagine it'll go away eventually.
But that counts on legislators.
Correct.
You know, making that allocation.
I agree.
And the legislature is dominated by urban. You know, are they going to make that decision? Maybe we're to the point that they will, but.
Well, the urban areas have the ability to respond, like you're saying, but the challenge, as you point out, is in a moment you don't. In a moment, the only place you can go to is your fund balance, because your tax cap right now is limited. And the same thing is at the borough. You know, they're at their tax cap now. I guess they got the 7%. They probably got a margin of 7% maintenance reserve contribution, but that's about all the room that they have in their tax cap. And so the ability of the municipalities, at least here, to respond is pretty limited immediately. You'll go to your fund balance. And I suspect that's what happens this year, is there's a wringing of hands. Folks go to their fund balances, including the school district. The legislature isn't going to do all that the governor proposes, but we're heading in a direction.
I see real consternation, though. I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I see real consternation fairly rapidly about places that we organize, places that we're gonna respond. We're not gonna, we're gonna provide, we're gonna pony up to maintain these services when state funds that might have been available to help defray that are directed to places that refuse to organize and are basically refusing to contribute to their own upkeep. I see consternation coming pretty quick.
Yeah, but you can't, you say we're gonna respond, but you can't necessarily, the city has a tax cap, the borough has a tax cap. The voters, really have shown little interest in supporting government in the state of Alaska. They support their dividend, but they don't, support, taxes, so.
They don't support their
What's to change?
new roofs.
What's to change in a municipal election as opposed to a state election?
Yeah. And Rick, here are the pages required to figure out the tax cap, if you will. Formula and everything that can be included in, and everything can be that can't be included. If you're interested for your little note taking, I'll give that to you.
Yeah, I probably would.
Let me make a
I
copy.
mean, I used to know the borough's tax cap a little bit.
Here's a little note there.
I'll make a copy.
Okay, sure.
That's why that question's not that easy to answer. When you ask it, it's like, let me show you this formula. But you're right, we're gonna start eating into fund balance. And that's gonna work for a year or so.
Was you mentioned is yours a code requirement or just an audit?
No, there's a code requirement on a minimum, and then we're above the minimum right now. But when we take a look at our labor contracts alone, the fire department's health insurance for 2019 went up 9.9%. We can't chase that. There's no way we can chase that, and we don't. Which caused the fire department, they say, listen, every year I work for you, I make less money. Okay? The police department says the same thing.
Yeah.
Everyone is saying the same thing, because if we don't have a city-wide health care, it's individual unions. And every union is seeing their cost of health insurance increase more than what the standard of living or the CPI is. CPI is a basket of goods, and so, for example, as I explained to some, yes, health went up, but used cars went down. Prices for used cars. Well, if you're in the market for a used car, that's good for you. But if you're not in the market for a used car, you're just spending more money on health care or food. So it's very frustrating to negotiate when you have very little to negotiate with. But, they want that 9.9%. There's no way we can give them that. And it's not us being mean, even though that's kind of the message, we don't care and stuff. It's math. It's just math. And it's frustrating.
We have 4 unions we negotiate with.
So those bargaining units, are they part of that statewide consortium, Alaska?
No.
Consortium or whatever that has a number of the union pensions?
Not yet. The police department is moving that way.
Yeah.
So that shows the frustration that is public record. So you had a tentative agreement that the city would, and the PSEA is going to move toward this Alaska healthcare system, and there was a cost.
Different.
Before we had an agreement, the cost went up. And now the council's going, wait a second. We were told this number, and it's not even signed yet, and it's now this number. And so, as you would expect, there's pushback. So they sign it. What's going to happen tomorrow? Is it going to go up again? Probably, the way it's been going. IBEW has a pretty good one, but it's also very expensive. Those union members in IBEW pay out of pocket every month about $1,000 for their portion of the health. Now, here's where you've got to take this into consideration and it becomes an argument. When we put together a package rate increase to IBEW, we say, here's your package rate increase. Let's say it's 1.5%. The union gets to pick, those members, where it goes. IBEW, for the longest time, had put it all toward salary, nothing toward health care. So their health care costs grew without any subsistence growing from the city, whereas their paychecks grew. So now IBEW members have a great talking point, and they always seem to get it in front of the press. Look how much we're paying out of pocket for our health care, and the city is not doing anything about it.
It all went to their wages.
A choice they made. But if you still would have put it all toward health care, they're still losing, okay? But it's not as bad as what they make it sound. But that second part of that conversation never gets taken. The soundbite is, I pay $1,000 out of pocket every month, and the city's not helping out. Now, last year, the city put $200 more toward their health care, and the way we wrote that offer, it says, we're going to give you $200 more a month. It must go toward health care. And they accepted that. Usually, they get to make the choice. But the council was a little tired of providing money. It go to wages, and then they show back up with the wives and the kids. You know, you're not helping me out on health care.
So what's the solution?
Grow the economy.
Yeah.
We'll expect an email by the end of the day, Rick, with a solution.
It's not a soundbite problem, and it's not a soundbite answer. And we live in sound bites, and so until someone is creative enough to say and articulates the soundbite issue where majority of people can understand, and then articulates the soundbite solution, the cap within a cap, I don't think it's possible to have a soundbite because it is so confusing. And as you see with that formula, you can't make that simple. It's just, it requires someone to sit down and study it, and people don't have time to do that.
It is very confusing.
Well, thank you, gentlemen.
That's my,
Very informative.
thanks, Jim.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you for your efforts.
Yeah.
That's why I love having Mike with me. The guy can explain. I'm good at some things, but explaining things gets real tough for me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike.
No problem, boss.
You're looking good.
I'm still standing there, Roger. They
Yeah.
tried to stop that from happening.
Yeah. Well, you're doing good. Thank you for your service.
Well, it was fun. Thanks.
We'll see you tonight, huh?
Well, I better get with it.
You will see me tonight.
For
That's
dinner.
right. That's right, yeah.
I'll be there.
Okay, cool.
It's nice of you. Thank you.
Well, El Chapo got guaranteed life in prison.
Oh.
Shocking.
That
Never
was
saw that
the
one
only
coming.
result we could have had.
How about that?
The only result.
Never saw that one coming.
Thanks, Mayor.
Yeah, AML next week, and, yeah,
Thanks, Mike.
the mayor's
Thank you.
meeting is next week, and
Be a busy week now.
have a good day. Yeah, hopefully that storm doesn't make its way north from Seattle all the way to Juneau. That's a pretty bad storm down there.
Still canceling flights to Seattle? Oh,
That's what I heard. I mean, it's terrible shape in Seattle. Even Hawaii got snow, I read.
Yeah, I got you all fed up with the.
In the northern
Yeah.
part, not a ton. Not in
Holly,
Honolulu on Waikiki Beach, but they still got some snow down there.
Whoa, whoa,
They might have got confused about part of the volcano action still. Thank you for finding it.
Yeah.
So,
When they get those over, and I don't know, as the working one, I've heard that.
These are actually the best, actually, I mean, I don't want to insult previous guests, but between you just now and presiding officer Cooper, these are two of the best presentations of priorities I've got.
Gene, you doing all right?
Signed a contract today, with, MEA to work for MEA.
Signing off.